Hey, I'm Guy Powell, and welcome to the next episode of the Backstory on Marketing and AI. And if you haven't already done so, please visit ProRelevant.com and sign up for all of these episodes and podcasts. As you know, I am the author of the Post-COVID Marketing Machine, Prepare Your Team to Win, and I'm in the process of writing a new book, which is tentatively called AI and Marketing Machine. So please go, though, to marketingmachine.prorelevant.com for more information. One thing that's going on today is you see a lot of headlines warning of AI and technology changing our world. Robots are taking jobs, and they're not paying taxes, by the way. They're AI-driven weapons. You've got implanted tech influencing our thoughts, and even the potential for humans to live forever. But what's fact or what's fiction? So, Professor J. Craig Wheeler, with decades of research, is a trusted guide through these questions, and he's going to be exploring the future grounded in science without alarmist or overly optimistic predictions. So let me tell you a little bit about Craig. So Professor J. Craig Wheeler is a renowned astrophysicist and professor of astronomy at the University of Texas. He applies the rigor of physics to these critical issues, making him a unique voice on the future of humanity. His perspective offers a thoughtful counterpoint to Ray Kurzweil's optimistic views on the singularity. Welcome, Craig. It's so good to have you.
It's much of a pleasure to be here, Guy. Thank you.
Oh, absolutely. So Craig, tell us a little bit about what your backstory is on AI. How did you get involved in it?
Yeah, well, it came out of teaching, basically. I mean, I did research in various things, including astrobiology, which gave me some different perspectives in various ways. And we had a program here at the University of Texas where professors would pick a book and then read it and discuss it with incoming freshmen. It was a way of introducing new students to this enormous state university. And I'd run across a statement from a preacher, actually, who said, well, I believe in biological evolution, but it's clear to me that Homo sapiens is the peak. This is it. And I realized, well, that doesn't strike me quite right as a scientist. I think we are creatures who are probably still evolving. I can't prove that. It was just an instinct. And so I picked Darwin to talk about with students. So we read Darwin and talked about it. And the students, many of them, it was a small class, a dozen people, were already aware that we knew enough through DNA and genome sequencing and things like that we were on the verge of affecting our own evolution and not waiting for nature to do natural selection. And that was kind of a wake-up call to me that these kids were ahead of me on that. And I thought, well, this is interesting to try to put this in the sweep of astronomy. We're in a 14 billion year old universe. We live on a 5 billion year old planet. Homo sapiens has been around for only several thousand years. Uh, where is this going in the future? And make a course out of that. So I taught this course for 5 years. I'm a pretty good teacher. I won prizes for it, but I have to say this was the most fun course I've ever taught because it was just full of new ideas all the time. The students would bring them. I'd try to bring them. It was just great intellectual fun to get into it. And then that evolved into, well, I've got these notes now. Can I turn this into a book? And that's how it evolved.
Yeah, that's so
And
funny
it was,
because
so my thinking wasn't about AI to start with. It was really this sort of biological slant. But the fact that AI was happening all over the place, it rapidly became one of the major stories of the book, of course.
yeah, absolutely. Well, it's so funny because I used to teach as well on marketing and effectiveness and stuff like that, and that I turned that into 4 or 5 books now. So it's the
There you
best
go.
way to do it because
There you go.
you get all the questions, you have to figure out the answers, you put them into your PowerPoint, you have it outlined perfectly, and then all you have to do is just put pen to paper on it.
Yeah, for 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, I know. That's
Right.
the thing that drives me nuts.
And
I'll get this done in a couple months, and 2 years later, you're still not done.
yeah, exactly. So, and then in the case of this, where I've gone through a traditional publisher, I've done some self-published things as well. But with a traditional publisher, then it takes a while for all that machinery to work as well. So from signing the contract, it's actually been a couple of years.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
and then in the middle of all that, ChatGPT came along, and like many authors writing about this, you can see where they've had to scramble, as I did, to go back in late in the game and try to say something intelligent about ChatGPT.
Yeah, exactly. Well, now that you bring that up, most people think that AI is ChatGPT, and certainly it's a big piece, that generative piece. But there are other kind of types of AI, I would say. But most people think about AI. And now, what about? Do you think AI? It is certainly disruptive. There's no question about it. What ChatGPT did, and some of the other AI large language models that are out there.
Right.
What do you think about that? The potential there, without it potentially becoming conscious, so to speak.
I well, it is coming in so many quarters of our lives without being conscious. The question of whether it will or artificial general intelligence is a whole big issue we can chat about. But it's going to be so intrusive in our lives in all sorts of different ways that just for people, society to get their heads around that, and I think that starts with the discussion. And this was a small revelation to me, but I listened to your most recent podcast with who was it, Mark Himmelbach,
Hmm.
and I tend to think of myself as a person who is marketed to, but of course here I am kind of selling a book, so I'm sort of on the marketing side now. There's an irony there, but the degree to which you and Mark talked about the ethics of this and how to think about it and how to integrate it into society, I hadn't quite thought of that aspect of it, and it was very interesting to think. Yes, this is an important part. I mean, everybody can do what little bit they can. Yours isn't necessarily a little bit in marketing, but it's a segment of everything that's going on. But the fact that people interested in marketing, like yourself and Mark, are thinking about the broader impacts of AI on that undertaking and others, I found very heartening. I think that's where we are and where we have to be. We have to have lots of intelligent people thinking about these things and talking about them, and then trying to decide on things like regulations and what should be regulated and what should not, because you don't want to kill the goose that's laying the golden egg and all that. Complicated questions.
Yeah,
But
that is for
it
sure.
starts with conversation and thinking. And
Yeah, yeah.
I'm
Actually, it was
very
interesting. I gave a talk last week on marketing and AI, and some of the legal implications, and how companies are struggling with how to incorporate AI into all of their activities, and including marketing. And yet, you have the legal aspects of, well, what if this gets discovered, or what, in discovery. So in a legal process, it could be discovered
yeah,
as
yeah.
part of the discovery process. And who owns the prompt? How do who owns that, or who owns the result, and things like that.
Yeah.
And that's only a very tiny little piece compared to, what you're talking about, and how now AI, as we're going forward, can have a huge impact on humanity across the board.
Yeah, I think so. Yes, just the art of prompting. People are learning how to do that in clever ways. And so that's now an intellectual process. And yeah, how does that fit into the
Yeah.
game? There's so many aspects like that to this game that trying to stay on top of those is going to be a real challenge. And so one of my perspectives that I'm laying out in the book is that I'm kind of arguing that our growth of knowledge is exponential. And what that kind of means is the more you know, the more you can do. And if you try to write that down mathematically, you actually get an exponential as a solution. And I don't think this is exactly exponential, but close to that. It could be faster, a little slower, different in different fields. But given that there is this natural feedback that makes things uh, go so quickly, that in the past there have been lots of changes. The Industrial Revolution, clearly a big deal. But I think in the greater sweep of history, that the Industrial Revolution was a bump a small bump even on this overall growth that's taking us faster and faster and faster and faster and faster. And yes, some things happen fast during the Industrial Revolution, but nowhere near as fast as they're changing
Mm.
now. And that we're apt to come to a phase, so it was disruptive then. It was disruptive when horse and buggies went away and automobiles came in. So there's no question there's been disruptions, but they've still been slow enough that with some effort, individuals and societies could adjust to those. But this exponential growth, if that's the way the trend continues, is apt to become so fast and so severe, it brings us to a completely new phase of human history where things are changing so fast that individuals and societies really can't keep up. And so that's the phase I see that is the
Mm.
immediate challenge. And AI does not have to become conscious to drive that. It,
Yeah.
it's the natural growth of nobody's in charge of this. It's individual researchers are doing stuff because they find it fun. Businesses are promoting it because they can make more of a profit. Perfectly valid thing to do. But nobody's nobody's sitting on top and saying you got to go do AI. It's just happening, and it leads to something like exponential growth, and that exponential growth can sneak up on us very quickly. It's happening very fast right now, but the prognosis is it's going to be even faster and even
Mm.
faster, even faster until all of us just, and well, we don't know, our jobs
Yeah.
go away, all
Yeah.
the things that
Yeah.
we've all kind of thought about, trying to anticipate that and see what do we do to, as best we can, make these sociological and individual adjustments to try to ride this wave. It's going to be a real
Right.
challenge.
Right.
I think there's a phase change that
Yeah.
it's.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the same exponential growth all the way along, but it's going to become so it's happening, not within a human lifetime, but in a week, in a
Yeah.
day,
Yeah. Yeah.
overnight.
Yep.
And that's going to be very different. That's
Yeah,
going to be.
absolutely. And I think it's already happening. I'm on the advisory board of a local technical college, and they had a big conference, and they brought in educators, high school educators, college educators, and I'm going to call them bureaucrats, but state bureaucrats in education. And then I was the industry guy at my table. And they said, well, what kind of problems are going on? And I started off, I says, well, first of all, if you guys aren't teaching AI, I will not hire anybody that's not taught about AI and knows how to use it.
Aha.
So I kind of threw down the gauntlet, so to speak, because for me to hire a knowledge worker, they have to know how to use AI. Nowadays, you can't teach somebody without it. Otherwise, they're going to be behind.
And
And
that's a brand new phase, of course.
yeah,
10 years
yeah,
ago, you wouldn't have said that. 5 years ago, you wouldn't have said that. Sort of
absolutely.
post chat GPT, then you have to say that.
Exactly, exactly. The sad part actually was then they went around the room, and then others were saying, well, my biggest problem is that as a teacher, I just want kids to show up at 8 o'clock in the morning when school starts. I want them to show up with food in their stomach and clean clothes and having slept through the night. And what a dichotomy. I mean, here you have, the knowledge worker, taking full advantage of this AI, and then you have I don't know, they called them the underserved population and being able to somehow bring them, up as well. And AI doesn't even affect that. It doesn't affect it doesn't affect getting food or stuff like that in their stomachs.
Well, it might even interfere with that. I
Well,
mean,
yeah, yeah,
if
yeah,
the parents just lost their job because an AI or a robot's taken over, then I mean, this is why this is threaded through society. It's a very complicated situation. I don't think we've done anything like this before.
yeah. Well, and my joke about robots paying taxes, if a robot
That
takes a
was a good one.
job of somebody that's paying taxes, all of a sudden, the revenue to the government, goes down. It's kind of like almost, the electric cars not paying gas taxes, and now there's not any money to be able to pay for the roads.
Yeah, I tried to touch on a lot of things, but I don't think I hit that one, Guy, but I'm going to steal it from you. A
It's
good
all
one.
your, it's not mine.
Yeah. It's yeah, I mean, so yeah, there's so many interconnected things, and
Yeah.
taxes as one of the things that makes society run, and effects on that. I do talk a little bit about economics, but it just didn't occur to me to talk about that particular aspect of it. So
Yeah.
that's
So
on me.
now there are some challenges. You think about, should there be guardrails on AI and the development and the use of it? Certainly today, although maybe not globally, but in the US, like when I think about genetic engineering, there are guardrails on that you can't clone human beings. You can't
Yes.
clone certain things, and those guardrails probably make a lot of sense. How does that apply now for AI?
Yeah, so I suspect in the long run that particular guardrail is going to be crashed through, if I can use that phrase. Just the urge to tinker with our biology, I think, is going to be so strong that that won't hold up forever. Right now, that's good. Uh, and the complementary side is right. There really isn't much of anything like that on the AI side. And that's one of the key questions. Should there be? So the Biden administration has been contemplating what sort of regulation should be there, but we're about to have a new administration with new perspectives, and that during the election process, this challenge of AI was not part of the conversation, I regret to say. There's too many other things to talk about. I understand that, but I think it's unfortunate that that wasn't raised at some level. So it was a little bit of a blip, but Andrew Yang was in the previous couple of election cycles, and he was making noise about this.
Mm,
What do we do with AI taking jobs, and should there be a universal basic income and things? And I thought that was a very healthy thing to do to bring that language into the conversation. But right now we really don't have any regulations, and trying to figure out what they ought to be, and healthy regulations, constructive regulations, guardrails of various kinds is starting to be part of a broader conversation, but they haven't been put in place particularly. We're relying on individual companies to construct that. And I think the companies, the Microsofts, the Facebooks, Meta, OpenAI, have to be part of the conversation, but it should be all the stakeholders at the table trying to figure out how to do
mm.
that. And what you're doing with your podcast and what I'm trying to do with this book is a part of that conversation to get people thinking about it and
Yeah, yeah.
voting accordingly, and keeping your representatives' feet to the fire to address the issues.
Well, and that's only one thing, in the US, unfortunately, we're not an island. It's a worldwide thing, and you
It's
have
a
then
global
China
thing.
and India, and they're going to probably have different guardrails or no guardrails or whatever it is. And so then do those guardrails end up making an economy, the US economy versus China or India or wherever? Does that then lead to something that puts the brakes on one economy and then, accelerates the economy on the other side?
Just another massive complication
Yeah.
going
Yeah.
forward. I mean, so companies battling against companies, as we're seeing in this country now, and then countries battling against countries, as you just said, a major part of the issue, and another reason why it is so complicated.
Yeah,
Uh,
absolutely. And then you have the ethics side. So, we talked, I
mhm.
mentioned the genetic engineering, but, now you have the AI, and the ethics underlying that. And how does it affect our own evolution? And should we be doing that? And what is it, or how is it going to be where we have, the AI and human collaboration together to advance all of society, not just a small portion of it, maybe?
Yes, yeah, another very important aspect, and again, a complex one, and I don't know quite how to adjudicate that, but raising the issue is very critical. But yeah, no, there's ethical issues woven through all of these topics, very much so. How do you, what are the ethical issues in the first place, and then how do you implement them in this complicated environment, which is different things in different societies and different countries and all that. Different people have different senses of ethics, and so how do you
Yeah.
cross
Yeah.
that path?
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. I was, as you were talking there, I was just thinking of something that I thought about a ways back, but now as you're talking, one thing that I could do is I could somehow take all of my emails and all of my writing and potentially put all of my data, whatever it is, take it out of like ancestry.com or whatever it is,
Yep.
and I could generate an AI based Guy Powell.
Yes, you
And
could.
that AI based Guy Powell could then, succeed me after I pass away, and I could still be there, potentially for my kids or grandkids or whatever. And they could then, find out what their history is. But in some senses, you almost don't die. You may not even, physically you're dead, but your kind of your essence of your knowledge and actions may actually, continue to live on in that way.
Hmm. Well, so you could do that voluntarily. You could do that right now at
Yeah.
some level. How accurate would be something else again, and then let the AI run your podcast, and you could just retire and put your feet up on your desk. So that's one aspect of it. Another is that you could do the same thing about someone else, maybe somebody you don't know, maybe a relative. But if it was, say it was a deceased relative, you can't go back and ask that deceased relative, may I use your information in this way going forward? So there's an ethical challenge there. How do you
Mm.
address that? And so well, lots of complicated issues. Another one is I'm not sure about the medium. So yeah, you say it could be there, but do you use floppy disks anymore? So whatever information you had at the time, maybe you can rescue it off those floppy disks. So now we're putting everything in the cloud and it's being stored in silicon chips and all these massive data centers and whatnot. Those going to be around 1,000 years from now? I have my doubts. Technology may advance. Who knows? So
Mm.
it's not like it's apt to be there forever. I'm working on the book right now where I'm having to delve into written records, and I've got some notes that people left behind on paper
Hmm.
100 years ago. I pick up that piece of paper written in English language and I read it and I can think about it and I can write about it, but I cannot pick up my old floppy disk because no computer reads that
Yeah.
easily anymore.
Yeah.
So this is already happening. I'm deeply suspicious of where all our information is going and can we store it for a long period of time.
Yeah, well, I think though, the good news is that you can actually, it's easier if it's in the cloud because then you can copy and paste it and do stuff. Even though,
Yes.
I mean, now there's so much data, there's so many videos, there's so much that
Yep.
it's almost too much to be able to copy and paste and move it. So it's
Yes.
almost like you're right. You can't get a floppy disk reader anymore. So that data may be, gone forever, but even though your data is now in these silicon chips, it may be only in that one spot now, but you can't move it or do anything with it.
It's all going to be quantum computing in another
Yeah.
decade or two, and nobody will care about the cloud anymore. And so, I'm exaggerating now, but I think there is an issue there that
Yeah. Yeah.
our data information may prove transient.
Yeah.
And what, if anything, do we do about that?
Yeah. So does that mean then, are human beings still going to be around, or are we just going to be a bunch of AI bots or something like that?
Uh,
What do you see kind of in the long term? What's going to happen there?
Yeah, so one of my taglines in the book is a kind of a challenging statement, but one I believe in, and it goes all the way back to when I started all this, that there were no Homo sapiens on this planet 1 million years ago, even less than that. I am pretty confident as a scientist and a person just trying to think about these things, and a bit as an astronomer knowing something about the sweep of time, there will not be any Homo sapiens on this planet or in this universe 1 million years from now.
Hmm.
There's sort of three possibilities that come immediately to mind, if we just waited for Darwinian natural evolution to take over, my conviction is, this is not necessarily shared by everyone, but my conviction is we will just naturally evolve into something else. We weren't here a million years ago. Unlikely we'll be here a million years
Mm.
from now. That's just letting things happen naturally. We could also, Putin has now said, you're going to send rockets from Ukraine, then we're going to nuke you back again. Now, I personally don't think that's going to happen. I think Putin is not that crazy. Uh, but the threat of nuclear war is still with us. And
Mm.
so we could just wipe ourselves out. That's a possibility. I think the most likely one is that we will not be able to resist the temptation to tinker with our own evolution. So right now there's a proscription against designer babies, but it happened in
Yep.
China. There was one
Yep.
example.
Yep.
Both the Chinese government and the biologists all came down on that guy and said, you shouldn't have done that. And we're going to banish you in various ways. But we've illustrated the potential. And I just don't think we're going to keep that genie in the bottle for very long. It's just going to be so tempting. And that's sort of just within our own human conception of things. But now you bring AI coming along, getting smarter, smarter, and smarter. And clearly, a lot of people talk about the prospect that we may have to integrate with our own machines in order to protect ourselves from the machines. And then that's yet a different thing that would cause us to be something other than, Homo
Hmm.
sapiens as we perceive each other right now. So lots of different paths. And
Yeah.
AI plays a role in some of it, and some of it is just the natural progression of science and human curiosity and human drive and initiative and
Yeah.
the
I like
world.
your point. I like your point that, if we weren't here a million years ago, we're probably not going to be here a million years from now just because we're going to evolve into something else and that actually, the statistics are certainly behind you, I would say. That the highest probability is that we are not going to be like we are anyway
Yep.
here a million years from now.
We evolved to live in space, for instance, if
Yeah,
we
yeah,
live
yeah,
successfully. Different environment, different pressures. I mean, already NASA's measuring these things in astronauts, changes in DNA and whatnot. So if you just extrapolate that in a kind of plausible way. Again, I can't prove any of this. I'm not a biologist anyway, but I mean, having a role for kind of guided speculation, I think is not only uh, valuable, but even mandated. You have to try to anticipate where things are going. That requires some extrapolation and some speculation, but you got to do that to know what to be on guard against. And so I think it's perfectly appropriate to speculate a bit, as I
mm,
do in the book. And there's some people may say, well, you've run off the cliff like Wile E. Coyote, but I think there's some justification for it. And I've tried to keep it under control, as you remarked in the beginning.
yeah,
I'm not total utopian and I'm not a total dystopian. I think the question is, can rational human beings work our way through this phase of history in some way. And they're complicated, but I think that is our task. And
yeah, yeah.
I can't give you a prescription for we need to do this now and that then and da 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 da. It's more complicated than that. But
Well, and there's so many
our
other
task.
competing forces that some want to do this, some don't want to do that, and it is going to be it's a good thing that we live in interesting times, that's for sure.
Well, we do that, right? Yeah, don't regulate you, don't regulate me, regulate that fellow behind the tree. Just to,
That's
that,
right.
that,
Not in my
that,
backyard.
not in my backyard. Yeah, all that.
Absolutely. So, one challenge that AI kind of has is that well, and our use of it has is that we have to access it through our fingers and through typing and okay, maybe speaking and what have you.
Not for
But
long, my friend.
but
Not
not,
for
yeah, well,
long.
that's where I was going is so is there going to be some way to make that connection between the human and the AI to be able to take even better advantage of what's going on there?
Yeah, no, I appreciate you asking that. There clearly are people thinking about this, but in a lot of the discussion, I think this question of tapping our brains and whatnot is under discussed. And so I've written about that some extensive level in the book. Um, right, and just to summarize the technology, I mean, so it all circles around brain-computer interfaces. And the original motivation, as so many of these things are, cure diseases, help people, wonderful motivations. But you get to the point where you can tap into the brain with little needles and whatnot, and measure neural signals more and more precisely, and that technology is racing ahead, and then basically read the brain signals. This is where AI comes in because those are complicated signals, and it turns out AI is a crucial tool for interpreting those neural signals into something external that you can do with it. So some of the first challenges were to control prosthetics for some quadriplegics and whatnot. Wonderful goal, but you can immediately see and go beyond that. I can now control, say, a robot arm or something, at the end of my arm because I'm quadriplegic, or in a robot on the moon, if you'll allow for a few second
Yeah.
delay
Yeah.
for the
Yeah.
signal to get there. You can think thoughts and control things, and so that's well underway, and you can envisage how that might get more and more sophisticated. Um, you can uh, then, in principle, to your particular question, you could control the computer controls without typing. And I
Mm.
think most of us, if we thought about it, I would be glad to get away from the keyboard and the mouse and just think what I want to think and have the machine respond to it. And I think we're getting very close to that. And big companies are working very hard to make that happen. That's the principal goal of some divisions of Meta and Google and whatnot.
Mm.
But then there's the other side of it, and it is more rudimentary now compared to the brain reading, but there's a little bit of success of writing to the brain. Once you kind of know, well, these neural signals do that, let me input those neural signals. And so now you're writing to the brain. And again, this technology is not as advanced as the reading.
Yeah.
It's there. That door is open. The genie's out of that bottle. And so if you develop that technology of both reading and writing, so the prosthetics control is basically telekinesis, moving things with your brain, something we've always dreamed of doing,
Mhm.
but that technology is now here with computers, and AI is helping to do that. And the recording part of it was putting things into your brain, and now make it a two-way path. So you can have brains talking to brains. And now you're talking about mental telepathy between two ordinary human beings in principle. I mean, that technology is not in place yet, but all the parts are. And you can just see the urge going forward to make
Mhm.
that happen. And then that's very different. And there's some people who are, oh boy, won't that be great? And I'm thinking, yeah, I'm delighted to have this conversation with you, but I don't really want to know what you're thinking, guy. And I don't really want you to know what I'm thinking. I'm
That's
happy to
true.
put it forth in English language, but the technology is going to march in that direction. And then, oh boy, the ethics and the regulations and how, who's controlling, who's reading mind about what, and where does that information go, and who stores it, and who uses that to market something to
Yep.
me.
Yep.
Mike,
Yep.
not to
Well,
be
or
too
even
close
politically, where
home
you,
here. And you can kind of see if we start binding brains together like that, something like a hive mind. So now
Mhm.
I'm exaggerating a bit,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
Borg, that was the whole thing about the Borg. They were all, connected together in one, in that case, evil entity. And I like being an individual. I don't want to be a Borg. I don't want to be part of a hive mind. But that is one way that technology could be going. And I think we as a society need be alert to that and put guardrails in place.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think there's very little discussion of that right now.
Well, I think you're right. I think there's definitely clear limits on that. Although I wouldn't mind being able to read a book in like, 5 minutes or something like that, just
Yeah, fair.
download it.
No, no, so I do, yeah, I'm trying not to be too pessimistic about it, pointing out these various things. But of course, there are advantages as well. And
Mm,
that is what part of what will drive the technology. Say, well, this is cute. Can we do this? Oh, well, we did that.
yep,
Can we do
yep,
this?
yep,
Just a natural step the way science and engineering and things proceed with
yeah,
no evil intent, but but we didn't see misinformation and disinformation coming with the early internet too. We thought it was going to allow everybody to talk to everybody, and we would be in a golden age of human cooperation. And it turns out that's not the only path forward. So you need to think about these various forks in the road as you're
Well, and I
walking.
don't even know if you can think about them ahead of time. It's almost like there's 100 different things that could happen that you could think of, and then there's the ones that are going to happen, which are probably a whole nother 1,000 of them that actually do happen.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, we're all human. Certainly am. I can't think of everything.
Yeah,
I have kind of had fun trying to think of as much as I could have and how it's all connected. But no, I don't have the hubris to think that I've been able to
yeah, yeah,
anticipate all the possible paths. That's
yeah,
again part of the complication. There's going to be uh, known unknowns and unknown unknowns
yep,
and
yep,
all that kind of stuff. But you individually and as a society need to think about as much as you can, as creatively as you can, and then say, okay, this is fine. This is really good. This is terrible. Let's not
yeah,
go in that direction.
yeah,
And
yeah.
that requires an ongoing, thoughtful conversation.
Well, I like your point about the ongoing conversation that I think is part of it because then you have more than one mind. You've got a million minds or a couple of 100 million
Exactly.
minds,
Yeah.
thinking about things and hopefully, maybe, for evil, maybe mostly, hopefully, mostly for good, but at least you'll have people thinking about them and then because I think that collective but independent thought and conversation on what can happen is really, what can drive civilization forward. And then in this case, on how to use this technology.
Yeah, it's not the whole thing, but bringing the wisdom of the crowd
Yeah,
to the problem, I think, is very important.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. So with that, so how do ordinary citizens like you and me influence the development of this kind of technology?
Well, my simple-minded recommendation at the end of the book, and being a little disappointed I didn't have something more to say, go out and do this, is vote. I think we have to have regulations of some kind. Our representatives are going to be the ones in our current representative democracy. This is the way it works, that you pick your representatives. And we've just had a big election. There's all sorts of transitions going on, but we're not done. There'll be more elections, and we have to keep an eye on our representatives to make sure they do what we think we would like them to do. But the whole democratic process, I think, is very, very important. So just saying vote is a little simple-minded, but at some level not. It's really how we do these social-wide, society-wide addressing issues. And
Yeah. Well, and
so,
it's worked for 200 years so far. So hopefully
yeah,
it'll continue to.
I'd
It's
like to see that continue to go, but
yeah,
it's more complicated because things are happening more rapidly, and our institutions are not necessarily set up to handle that rapid.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's
Well,
bundled into the issue.
wasn't it Churchill's thing and said, I can't remember what it was. Democracy is a terrible way to make decisions, but it's the best one that's out there.
Something like that.
Something like that. I don't know what it is, but anyway, yeah. So, well, Craig, thank you so much. This has been really fascinating. Is there anything else you'd like to add that we weren't able to cover?
Well, I just to stress that I think there's some urgency involved in all of this, and it's important for people to be alert to the changes. There's kind of a human psychology that you go through your ordinary life and you don't notice things, and then you notice something, And once you've noticed an item of it, then you start noticing it in other places as well. And so one of the things I did was to have the students and I myself bring items every day to class of an example of how technology is changing. And so I'm still trying to collect those alerts, but my call is, besides voting, be alert to these changes. Notice them when they happen. And if you start noticing, you'll notice even more. So it's that first step of just being attuned to this, I think is a really important thing to do. And so it's kind of
Mm.
a mix of those things, but being alert to them, which is why we're having these conversations and these discussions, is to help to bring that alertness to
Yeah,
people.
yeah, yeah. Knowledge is a good thing, and certainly, trying to learn more and understand more is definitely a good way to to be part of the conversation and hopefully either learn from it and or help the whole community to improve themselves through it.
Yep. And then, of course, I'd also like to mark it one last time and say the Path to Singularity from Prometheus Press, and available at any outlet near you.
Well, fantastic. So, well, that was going to be one of my next questions
All
was,
right.
so Path to Singularity. So, it's available on Amazon and bookstores. Is there a website we can go to or anything like that?
Prometheus.com has a website, has a link to
Okay.
it. And I've got a personal website where I put my writing and stuff on. You can just Google browse for J. Craig Wheeler
Yeah.
and it'll pop up. It's hosted by the Authors Guild,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
it's fairly easy to find.
Yep, yep, fantastic. Well, thank you for that. And so go to either prometheus.com or Google J. Craig Wheeler and find out more about the path to singularity. It is definitely, I mean, we are on the cusp of some enormous change, and we've already started to see it, whether it's in marketing, which is what I do, or just generally in the rest of the world. And this sounds like a book that we all need to look at, and so I'm definitely going to get my copy right away.
Great. Thank you for the support. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Well, at least you get one
As a
stamp.
small marketing agent myself,
That's
I
right. That was right. That's right. Well, this is marketing, so we're
there
all
you,
always in marketing, even though we don't know it.
yeah, fair enough.
Yeah. So, Craig, thank you so much. And for the audience, please stay tuned for many other videos in this series of the backstory on marketing and AI. And please visit marketingmachine.com, marketingmachine.prorelevant.com, and learn more about my upcoming book, AI and Marketing Machine. And if you'd like to, please rate this episode with 5 stars. Thank you very much. And Craig, thank you so much.
You're very welcome. I enjoyed it, Guy. Thank you.
Thank you.